The world has always held a peculiar fascination for vintage photography, especially those sepia-toned echoes from the early 20th century. These images, often faded and creased, serve as more than mere historical records. They are true portals, offering tantalizing glimpses into a bygone era that, to our modern sensibilities, often appears simpler, more innocent, and utterly removed from the complex tapestry of our present. We pore over them, searching for clues, for faces that speak across the decades, for the quiet dignity or the unvarnished joy of lives lived 100 years ago. It is within this vast, captivating archive of the past that our story truly begins, centered around a photograph taken in the year 1910. At first glance, it was an entirely ordinary family portrait, one among thousands. A group of children, perhaps siblings or cousins, stood or sat together, their faces composed for the camera, a common practice in an age when photography was still a deliberate, formal event. Among them, a young boy, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, occupied a somewhat central position, his gaze directed towards the lens with the typical earnestness of a child asked to sit still. The initial impression was one of quaint nostalgia, a charming snapshot of everyday life, an embodiment of the era's quiet domesticity and the presumed innocence of its youth. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, to suggest the profound unease it would soon evoke. It was a picture that whispered of tranquility, of a world untouched by the rapid technological changes and global conflicts that would soon redefine the century. It seemed in every conceivable way a harmless relic. Yet, as with so many seemingly benign artifacts of the past, the most innocent images can sometimes harbor the darkest secrets, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right gaze, the right angle of light, the right moment of scrutiny to finally reveal their unsettling truths. The deceptive nature of appearances is a powerful force, and the stories that can be hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of an image, are often the most potent and unsettling. This photograph, in its quiet, unassuming way, was about to prove that axiom with chilling clarity. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's most compelling mysteries. Our journey into this hidden narrative is guided by an unnamed, dedicated historical photo researcher, an individual whose life revolves around the quiet, often solitary pursuit of forgotten narratives. They are an archivist by trade, but an intellectual detective by nature, possessing a keen eye for detail honed over countless hours spent sifting through digital scans and fragile physical prints. Their routine is a methodical ballet of preservation and discovery, meticulously digitalizing old collections, cross-referencing metadata, and poring over faded handwritten notes. It is a solitary pursuit, driven by an insatiable intellectual curiosity and a deep, abiding desire to preserve history, not just as a collection of facts, but as a living, breathing testament to human experience. This researcher had over the years cultivated a quiet but formidable reputation within their niche for uncovering subtle historical anomalies, for spotting the overlooked detail in a seemingly mundane artifact that others might dismiss. They had a knack for finding the thread that once pulled could unravel an entire forgotten tapestry of events. This particular photograph, the 1910 family portrait, came into their possession as part of a newly digitized collection from a regional historical society. It was an anonymous donation, a collection of miscellaneous family albums and loose prints dating from the late 19th to early 20th centuries, meant to expand the society's visual archive of early 20th century family life in the area. The researchers' initial interest in the photograph was purely academic, a professional engagement with historical data points. They noted the composition, typical of studio portraits of the era, perhaps even taken in a makeshift studio setup within a modest home. The clothing of the children, their stiff poses, the backdrop, all were meticulously cataloged as examples of period attire and social customs, valuable information for researchers studying the material culture of the time. The boy, like the others, was simply another subject, another face in the vast ocean of forgotten individuals. The protagonist's first casual viewing of the photo was exactly that, casual. It was part of an initial triage, a quick scan to assess its condition and place it within the broader collection. They noted its typical features, the somewhat forced smiles, the slightly awkward stances indicative of long exposure times, the period attire that spoke of a particular social stratum. The backdrop, a simple painted canvas or a plain wall, suggested a modest home setting or a traveling photographer's temporary studio. The boy in the photo, as mentioned, was centrally placed, his gaze slightly more direct perhaps than the other children who might have been more distracted or shy. It was then a fleeting sensation, almost imperceptible, that brushed against the researcher's subconscious. A flicker of something off, a momentary discord in the otherwise harmonious arrangement of innocence. It was nothing concrete, merely a whisper of unease, a phantom chill that passed as quickly as it came. The protagonist, accustomed to long hours of detailed work, often punctuated by visual fatigue or the occasional trick of light on an old print, initially dismissed it as an overactive imagination, a common occupational hazard. The image at that stage still appeared entirely innocent, a simple window into a forgotten moment. Yet a seed of curiosity, however tiny, had been planted. A subtle, almost imperceptible pull to revisit it later, to grant it a second more focused glance, lingered in the periphery of their thoughts. The contrast between the perceived innocence of the image and the subconscious discomfort it evoked was a subtle tension, a barely audible note in the symphony of the past, setting the stage for a deeper, far more unsettling mystery that was about to unfold. The lingering sensation of unease, a faint echo from the boy's eyes in that antiquated photograph, refused to dissipate. It had been days, perhaps even weeks, since the unnamed historical researcher had first laid eyes upon the seemingly innocuous 1910 family portrait. The image had initially been filed away, categorized among countless others in the vast digital archives, a mere data point in a broader study of early 20th century domestic life. Yet that subtle, almost imperceptible discord in the boy's gaze had woven itself into the fabric of the researcher's subconscious, a quiet hum beneath the surface of daily thought compelling a return. Driven by an instinct honed over years of sifting through forgotten histories, the researcher navigated back to the digital file. The high-resolution scan of the old photograph shimmered on the screen, its sepia tones evoking a world long past. This time, the approach was far from casual. Digital tools were employed with a surgeon's precision, zooming into the intricate details of the boy's face, enhancing the faint light, scrutinizing every pixel. The initial thought was that it must be an optical illusion, a trick of the light, perhaps a flaw in the original photographic plate, or even a subtle degradation of the emulsion over the century. After all, such anomalies were common in aged images. But as the magnification increased and the boy's features filled the screen, a growing conviction began to settle in. What was being observed was not an artifact of the medium, but something profoundly inherent in the boy's expression, a quality that seemed to defy the innocent posed setting. The academic detachment that usually governed the researcher's work began to erode, replaced by a more personal, almost empathetic connection to the subject, a profound sense of mystery unfurling. The exact moment of discovery arrived with a chilling clarity. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic revelation, but a slow, creeping understanding that solidified with each incremental zoom. Deep within the boy's pupils, or perhaps in the reflection caught on the surface of his eyes, there was a subtle distortion. It wasn't a clear, discernible image, but a faint, almost ghostly echo of something out of place. It was like looking at a ripple on a still pond, suggesting an unseen disturbance beneath. More than just a reflection, there was an unusual emotional quality in his gaze, a subtle tension or apprehension that profoundly contradicted the serene, almost idealized innocence of the surrounding family portrait. His slight smile, his neatly combed hair, the stiff collar of his shirt, all spoke of a child dutifully posing for a photograph. But his eyes, once closely observed, whispered a different story, a narrative of quiet alarm or profound discomfort. The impact on the researcher was immediate and visceral. A sudden chill traced its way down the spine, a jolt of realization that this photograph, once dismissed as merely quaint, harbored a secret far more disturbing than any photographic imperfection. Once this detail was noticed, it became impossible to unsee. The entire perception of the image transformed. The boy's seemingly innocent face, framed by the conventions of a bygone era, now held a terrifying depth, a silent scream frozen in time. The quaint nostalgia evaporated, replaced by a profound sense of unease. The contrast between his outward presentation and the unsettling reflection within his gaze was stark, creating an unsettling dichotomy that demanded immediate investigation. An immediate, overwhelming compulsion took hold. The anomaly in the boy's eyes had to be understood. The researchers' first steps of investigation were systematic, yet fueled by a burgeoning urgency. The photo was cross-referenced with every available archive record. Were there any accompanying notes, any documentation that spoke of the family, their names, the precise date, or the location where the picture was taken? The initial findings were frustratingly sparse. There was no clear information, only generic details that placed the photograph within a broad geographical area and the specified year. This scarcity of information, rather than alleviating the mystery, only deepened it. The passage of time, the inherent challenges of historical research into anonymous or little documented lives, became the primary antagonist in this nascent quest. Each dead end, each unanswered query, amplified the feeling that a forgotten story, perhaps a tragic one, was desperately trying to emerge from the past through the silent plea in the boy's eyes. The researcher felt an unshakable commitment to giving a voice to this silent plea from history, even if the true nature of that plea remained shrouded in the mists of a century gone by. The researcher, whose name had long faded from the routine of her solitary work, found herself drawn into a relentless pursuit, her days and nights now structured around the silent plea in the boy's eyes. The initial fleeting unease had solidified into a concrete conviction that a story, perhaps a tragic one, lay buried beneath the sepia tones of the 1910 photograph. Her workspace, usually a model of organized chaos, transformed into a war room of historical investigation. Digital archives, once a familiar landscape, became a battleground where she painstakingly sifted through countless records, each click of the mouse a step deeper into the past. Her focus narrowed, laser-sharp, on the potential geographical location. The faint possibility of a family name gleaned from a smudged note on the photo's back, and the unwavering anchor of the year 1910. She dove headfirst into digitized census records, a labyrinth of names, ages, and occupations, trying to match any configuration to the faces in the portrait. Local newspaper archives of the era became her daily reading, searching for obituaries, community news, or any mention of families residing in the suspected region. Birth and death certificates, property deeds, and even obscure community histories from small-town libraries were her quarry. Each document was scrutinized, every line read, every date cross-referenced, her eyes scanning for the smallest anomaly, the most fleeting connection. The process was agonizingly slow, a test of endurance against the sheer volume of data and the inherent fragility of historical preservation. Yet small, fragmented pieces of information began to surface, like tiny islands emerging from a vast, forgotten ocean, a possible family name, a common surname like Miller or Johnson, but one that appeared with unusual frequency in a specific county. A general geographical area hinted at by the architectural style of the house in the background, or a fleeting mention in a local gazette about a family with several children around that time. These were not breakthroughs in the traditional sense, but they were lifelines. Each small lead, though seemingly insignificant, fueled her determination, reinforcing the belief that there was a tangible story, a living history behind the boy and his unsettling gaze. The challenges were immense: countless dead ends, misleading information from poorly recorded documents, the sheer volume of data threatening to overwhelm, and the persistent frustration of historical gaps that seemed deliberately placed to obscure the truth. But the image of the boy, perpetually innocent yet profoundly disturbed, propelled her onward. It was amidst this painstaking excavation that the first significant inconsistencies began to emerge, casting a long, chilling shadow over the portrait's initial innocence. She cross-referenced a census record from 1910 for a family with a plausible surname and the right number of children in the general area. The names were there, the ages aligned, but one of the children listed in the census seemed to be missing from the photograph. Conversely, a child present in the photograph did not appear in the official family roster. It was a subtle discrepancy at first, easily dismissed as a clerical error or a child being away during the census taker's visit. But as more fragmented records were pieced together, other anomalies surfaced. A birth date for one of the children in the photo didn't quite align with their apparent age, or a death record for a family member appeared suspiciously close to the photo's date, yet they were smiling in the picture. The researchers' initial academic curiosity began to curdle into a profound sense of unease. The innocent family portrait, once viewed as a straightforward historical artifact, now felt staged, incomplete, or even deliberately misleading. The realization dawned that the family depicted might have been experiencing hidden turmoil, a secret sorrow, or that the boy himself was part of a larger unspoken secret that the camera had inadvertently captured. This was no longer just about identifying faces. It was about unmasking a carefully constructed facade. The emotional impact of these discoveries was profound, a palpable shift from mere intellectual curiosity to a deep-seated sense of foreboding. An urgency to uncover the truth now gnawed at her, transforming the unsettling feeling first sparked by the boy's eyes into a concrete, agonizing puzzle she felt compelled to solve. The boy's gaze, once a whisper, was now a persistent, silent scream, demanding attention. The primary antagonist in this phase of her investigation was not a person, but the relentless, suffocating silence of the past. A century had passed, erasing living witnesses, scattering families, and allowing memories to fade into the ether. The bureaucratic hurdles of accessing century-old records were frustratingly high, even with modern digital tools. Incomplete archives, documents destroyed by fire or neglect, and the sheer difficulty of piecing together the intricate lives of anonymous individuals from over 100 years ago became constant obstacles. She hit walls repeatedly, encountering blank pages where crucial information should have been, or finding records so vague they offered no tangible lead. There were moments of despair, where the sheer weight of the task threatened to crush her resolve, and the temptation to abandon the fruitless pursuit loomed large. Yet each time she felt herself falter, the image of the boy's eyes, with their unsettling secret, would flash in her mind, becoming a powerful, almost mystical driving force. It was an unspoken demand for justice, for understanding, a silent plea from the past that she and she alone seemed destined to hear. She felt a profound sense of responsibility towards this anonymous boy, a nameless child whose gaze had held a secret for 100 years. His story, whatever it was, deserved to be told, she believed, no matter how difficult the journey or how dark the revelations might prove to be. The weight of this self-imposed mission grew heavier with each passing day, solidifying her commitment to pierce through the veil of time and silence and bring his hidden truth to light. The image was no longer just a research subject. It was a ghost, and she, its unwilling medium. The researcher, now more a detective of the past than a mere archivist, found herself increasingly drawn to the fringes of recorded history. Her method evolved from systematic scanning to an almost intuitive hunt for anomalies. It was during one such late-night foray into a digitized collection of obscure local history pamphlets that she stumbled upon something that changed everything. Tucked away in a digitized version of Chronicles of Blackwood Creek, a self-published, poorly indexed volume from the 1950s, was a brief, almost dismissible mention of unusual occurrences in the valley during the early 1910s. The text spoke of a cluster of misfortunes, a sudden outbreak of illness that seemed to target specific families, a string of unexplained disappearances of livestock, and even a couple of house fires attributed to faulty wiring but remembered by old-timers with a suspicious shake of the head. Initially, these seemed like isolated incidents, the typical hardships of rural life in a bygone era, easily dismissed as coincidences. However, as she cross-referenced the vague geographical markers and approximate dates with the limited information she had gleaned about the boy's family, a potential surname, a general area of residence, a chilling pattern began to emerge. The unusual occurrences weren't random. They seemed concentrated within a small, tight-knit community, the very one where her research suggested the boy's family might have lived. The seemingly unrelated events, the sickness, the disappearances, the fires, began to coalesce, forming a disturbing backdrop against which the innocent photo suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. The smiling faces, the period attire, the quaint setting, all now felt like a fragile veneer, barely concealing a simmering cauldron of unseen tragedy and dark secrets. Her heart pounded with a mixture of intellectual excitement from a significant breakthrough and a profound, icy dread at the implications. The boy's eyes, she now believed with terrifying certainty, were not merely reflecting a fleeting image. They were a silent witness to something far more significant, more tragic, and undeniably sinister than she had initially dared to imagine. Every new connection she forged pulled her deeper into the chilling realization that the past was not just quiet, but actively hiding something. The fragmented clues, once disparate threads, now started weaving into a tapestry of local folklore she had previously encountered but dismissed as mere superstition. Blackwood Creek. The very name of the community now resonated with a darker undertone. Whispers of a shadow man, or the collector, had persisted in the area's oral history, tales passed down through generations of fear and caution, often dismissed by modern historians as exaggerated rural anxieties. These stories spoke of a malevolent presence, a figure who preyed on the vulnerable, particularly children or those on the fringes of society, leaving behind only unanswered questions and lingering fear. A local legend detailed how families would sometimes mysteriously lose a child, or their entire homestead would vanish in a blaze, often after a period of strange occurrences, much like those mentioned in the obscure pamphlet. As she delved deeper, she found an old newspaper clipping from a regional paper dated 1912, reporting on the unsolved disappearance of a young boy named Thomas, whose description, though vague, bore an unsettling resemblance to the boy in her photograph. The article mentioned the family's sudden move shortly after, their silence, and the community's swift desire to forget the incident. This was not merely a coincidence, it was a compelling overlap. The protagonist's growing conviction solidified. The boy in the photo was not just an anonymous face, but a pivotal figure, perhaps a victim, or more chillingly, a key observer to the very events that fueled these dark local legends. The idea that this innocent child's gaze held a direct link to an unsolved mystery, a community's forgotten trauma, sent shivers down her spine. It was a chilling sensation. These historical echoes as the past began to speak through fragmented records and unsettling folklore, revealing a narrative far more complex and disturbing than any she had encountered before. The innocuous photograph had become a portal to a century-old nightmare, and she was now firmly caught within its grasp. The investigation had consumed her, transforming from a meticulous academic pursuit into a relentless, all-encompassing obsession. Her personal life, Once a well-balanced routine of research, personal interests, and social connections had completely atrophied. Meals were forgotten, sleep became a luxury stolen in fitful bursts, and the outside world faded into an indistinct blur. Every waking moment, and many of her sleeping ones, were dedicated to piecing together the fragments of this forgotten tragedy. The boy's eyes, magnified on her screen, seemed to follow her, a silent, demanding presence. She felt a growing sense of isolation, burdened by a secret she was not yet ready to share, a truth too fragile and disturbing to articulate. Moments of doubt began to creep in, not about the existence of the secret, but about her own sanity. Was she projecting? Was the weight of the historical darkness affecting her judgment? There were unsettling dreams, vivid and disturbing, filled with shadowy figures and muffled screams, always ending with the boy's wide, silent gaze. She sometimes felt a prickling sensation on her skin, a feeling of being watched, especially when deep in research late at night. It was as if the past itself was resisting her intrusion, guarding its secrets with an unseen force. Minor antagonistic elements also materialize. A local historian she contacted, known for his dismissive attitude towards sensationalized folklore, subtly obstructed her access to certain restricted archives, hinting that some stories were best left buried. His thinly veiled scorn only fueled her resolve, confirming her suspicion that there was indeed something significant to hide. This resistance from the past, from its gatekeepers, only strengthened her belief in the moral imperative she felt. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily. Was she disturbing a century-old peace, reopening old wounds that had long since healed over? Or was she fulfilling a sacred duty to uncover a potential injustice or tragedy? The answer, she knew, lay in the boy's eyes. Her emotional connection to him deepened, becoming almost paternal. She felt a profound responsibility to uncover his truth, to give him a voice, even if it brought discomfort, even if it brought danger. The pursuit was no longer just for understanding. It was for him. It was a promise made across the chasm of time, a vow to illuminate the darkness he had silently witnessed. The old photograph, once a simple window to the past, had become a mirror reflecting her own unwavering commitment to justice. The weight of the past pressed down on the researcher, a constant heavy presence that permeated her waking thoughts and haunted her brief, restless sleeps. The boy's silent plea resonated with an almost physical intensity. Just when the labyrinth of historical archives threatened to swallow her whole, a thread, impossibly fine yet undeniably tangible, finally presented itself. It wasn't a grand revelation, but a small, almost overlooked detail in an old county register, a document she had dismissed twice before as irrelevant. Tucked away within a list of property transfers from 1912, 2 years after the photograph was taken, she found a familiar surname, one that had appeared fleetingly in a census record she'd cross-referenced months ago. This time, however, the entry included an address, a specific street name, and a house number that, while no longer existing, could be pinpointed on a faded 1905 city map. It was a concrete lead, a direct, undeniable link between the anonymous family in the photograph and a specific location and time. The name Miller was common enough, but the accompanying details, when cross-referenced with the architectural style of the house visible in the background of the 1910 portrait, sent a jolt of electricity through her. The arched window frames, the distinct porch railing, even the pattern of the brickwork, all matched the historical blueprints of the Miller residence on Elm Street. This wasn't merely a potential match, it was a confirmation. A local newspaper article detailing a minor fire in the neighborhood in late 1910 made a passing mention of the Miller family being unaffected, a detail that now seemed ironic given the unsettling nature of her quest. The house itself became a focal point, transforming the abstract historical puzzle into a very real, almost palpable story waiting to be fully unearthed. The sudden clarity that emerged was breathtaking, bringing disparate, fragmented clues together into a coherent, albeit still incomplete, picture. The boy, his family, and their hidden secret were no longer floating in the ether of the past. They were rooted in a physical place, a tangible connection she could now pursue. Armed with this newfound certainty, the researcher knew her next step was inevitable. She had to visit the location. The journey felt less like a research trip and more like a pilgrimage. Elm Street, now a bustling thoroughfare, bore little resemblance to its 1910 incarnation. The Miller house was long gone, replaced by a nondescript commercial building. Yet, as she stood on the sidewalk, she could almost feel the ghosts of the past swirling around her. The weight of history in that spot was immense, the silence of vanished lives speaking volumes. Her eyes scanned the surrounding area, searching for any echo of the past. A small, overgrown patch of land adjacent to the commercial building, now a forgotten community garden, caught her attention. Buried beneath layers of weeds and urban decay, she found remnants of an old stone foundation, subtly different from the modern structures. With careful excavation, she uncovered a few distinctive red bricks, their faded color and specific composition matching the pattern she'd observed in the boy's photograph. It was a chilling confirmation that she stood on the very ground where the boy had once lived, where his portrait had been taken. As luck would have it, an elderly woman tending to a small rose bush in the community garden noticed her focused intensity. Mrs. Henderson, a spry 90-year-old, had lived in the neighborhood her entire life. Her eyes, though clouded by age, held a spark of sharp memory. "Oh, that old Miller place," she mused, a faraway look in her eyes. "My grandmother used to talk about it. Said there was always something a bit off about that house. A sadness, she'd call it, and that poor little boy, always so quiet." Mrs. Henderson spoke of whispers, of a family that kept to themselves, and of a sudden, unexplained departure shortly after the fire she'd read about. "Never knew what truly happened," she said, shaking her head. "Folks just said they went away, but my grandmother swore there was more to it." A secret, she believed, that they carried with them. The encounter was a crucial oral history link, a living echo from the distant past, adding a layer of human memory to the cold, hard facts she had unearthed. Standing there, feeling the cool breeze on her skin, she felt an unsettling proximity to the past, the weight of the secret almost palpable. The physical discoveries in Mrs. Henderson's fragmented stories coalesced in the researcher's mind, drawing her back relentlessly to the initial anomaly in the boy's eyes. The bricks, the street, the whispers of sadness and secrets, and they all pointed to something specific. She returned to her digital archive, enhancing the photograph once more, zooming in on the boy's gaze with a new, terrifying certainty. What she had initially dismissed as a trick of light, a photographic imperfection, or a mere shadow, now began to resolve itself. The reflection in his pupils was not simply a blur of light. It was a distorted miniature image. It wasn't a person or an object directly in front of him, but something slightly to the side, outside the immediate frame, yet clearly within his field of vision. The angle, the distortion, the faint, flickering quality of the image, it all clicked into place. The reflection, she now realized with a sickening lurch, was of a specific horrifying scene, a chaotic, fiery glow, not from a distant, contained fire, but from something far closer, far more intense, and within that glow, barely discernible, was the faint, desperate outline of a figure blurred by motion and heat, undeniably struggling. The boy's innocent eyes, wide with a terror that transcended the posed stillness of the portrait, had captured a fleeting, unconscious glimpse of a terrible event unfolding just beyond the camera's view at the very moment the picture was taken. His seemingly innocent gaze was not just looking at the photographer, it was staring horrified at something else entirely. The realization was a punch to the gut. The emotional intensity of this dawning understanding was a mixture of sheer terror for the boy, profound empathy for whatever unseen victim was reflected, and a chilling sense of uncovering a deeply buried injustice. The innocent photo had now fully transformed into a chilling piece of evidence, a silent scream from the past, echoing a century later through the eyes of a child. The truth, in its raw, unfiltered horror, was finally beginning to emerge. The image was no longer just a research subject. It was a ghost, and she, its unwilling medium. Days blurred into weeks, nights into early mornings as the researcher, driven by an almost feverish intensity, pursued every last thread of information. The fragmented clues, the inconsistencies, the local legends, all pointed towards a deeper, darker narrative. She felt herself on the precipice of understanding, but the final, crucial piece remained elusive, a shadow just beyond her grasp. Then, in the dusty basement archives of a small, forgotten county courthouse, amidst boxes of brittle yellowed documents marked Miscellaneous Public Records 1900-1920, she found it. Tucked beneath property deeds and outdated tax assessments was a single thin file, barely an inch thick, bound with a frayed ribbon. Its label was stark. Incident Report, Elmwood District, October 1910. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the urgency of a century-old secret. With trembling hands she opened the file. Inside lay a faded, handwritten police report, detailing a series of unusual circumstances surrounding a local family, the Abernathys, who lived in the very district she had identified. The report mentioned a domestic disturbance that escalated into a tragic accident involving a young child, occurring mere days after the general time frame of the photograph. Further in, a sworn affidavit from a distressed neighbor spoke of a sudden violent argument, a terrifying scream, and then an unnerving silence. A coroner's preliminary findings, also in the file, alluded to injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. It was not a clear confession, but the accumulation of details, the specific dates, the family name, and the chilling echoes of the local legend she had uncovered painted an undeniable picture. This was the penultimate piece, the keystone that locked all the other disparate elements into place, leaving no room for doubt. The sense of vindication was immense, a powerful surge of intellectual triumph, but it was immediately overshadowed by a profound, gut-wrenching sadness at the nature of the truth now laid bare. The documents, pieced together with meticulous care, revealed a horrifying truth. The tragic accident was anything but. The report detailed a volatile argument between the Abernathy parents, fueled by desperation and perhaps something darker that had spiraled out of control. In a moment of uncontrolled rage, an object, the report vaguely described it as a heavy, decorative household item, had been violently thrown. It was not aimed at the child, but in the chaos, the young boy standing too close had been caught in the crossfire. The coroner's report, though carefully worded to avoid direct accusation, strongly implied blunt force trauma to the head, inconsistent with a simple tumble. The incident had occurred inside the family home, just a few feet from the very window where the photograph had been taken. The boy in the photo, little Thomas Abernathy, dressed in his Sunday best, had been positioned for the portrait. His siblings, perhaps coached to smile, looked stiffly at the camera. But Thomas, in that fleeting instant, had turned his head slightly, his gaze drifting just beyond the photographer's lens towards the open doorway of the house. His eyes, captured in that innocent-looking portrait, reflected the sudden, horrific trajectory of the thrown object, the flash of desperate anger in a parent's face, or perhaps the terrified expression of a sibling witnessing the event. The photograph, seemingly a benign snapshot of a family moment, had unknowingly frozen a microsecond of terror, a silent testament to a hidden crime, a sudden, devastating accident veiled in domestic tragedy that unfolded precisely at the moment the shutter clicked. The posed, static nature of the photograph was now grotesquely juxtaposed against the dynamic, horrifying reality it had unknowingly captured through the boy's involuntary, terrified gaze. The precise detail reflected was not a fire or a distant figure, but the very weapon of tragedy, a heavy, ornate mantel clock arcing through the air, reflected in the wide, dilated pupils of a child about to become a victim. The full weight of this revelation crushed the researcher with an almost physical force. The documents were cold, factual, but the story they told was imbued with searing pain and injustice. She felt a profound and unsettling connection to little Thomas, whose silent plea had echoed through a century, finally finding a voice in her. Her initial academic detachment had long evaporated, replaced by a visceral empathy for the boy and the family caught in this dreadful web. She reread the reports, each word a hammer blow to her conscience, imagining the scene, the fear in Thomas's eyes, the desperate, hushed aftermath, the horror of the event, the suppression of the truth, the quiet burial of a child whose death was far from accidental. It all settled upon her like a shroud. This was no longer just a research project. It was a moral reckoning. She felt a profound sense of responsibility not merely to present the facts, but to honor Thomas's memory, to give voice to the silent witness in the photograph. This discovery transcended mere intellectual curiosity. It had become a deeply personal and moral undertaking. She was the conduit for a forgotten voice, a witness to a century-old tragedy that demanded to be acknowledged. The determination to ensure this story was finally told, not just for historical accuracy, but for the memory of the boy and any other victims involved, solidified into an unshakable resolve. The truth, however painful, had to emerge from the shadows, shattering the illusion of innocence that had cloaked the image for so long. The researcher, now fully immersed in the horrifying reality, revisited the photograph with a new agonizing clarity. Every pixel, once a source of academic curiosity, now screamed the boy's silent terror. The full, devastating truth, painstakingly unearthed from forgotten reports and hushed family histories, was laid bare. Little Thomas Abernathy, standing stiffly for a family portrait, had his life brutally cut short by a moment of uncontrolled rage. His eyes, in that innocent-looking 1910 photograph, were not merely reflecting a general sense of fear nor a vague, indistinct object. No, the digital enhancements, coupled with the precise measurements and trajectory analysis from the unearthed police reports, confirmed the chilling, undeniable detail. Within the boy's wide, dilated pupils, a miniature, distorted image shimmered. The heavy, ornate mantel clock, its brass pendulum glinting, caught midair. It was a weapon, hurled with furious intent, arcing directly towards the unsuspecting child. The reflection wasn't static. It conveyed the blur of motion, the terrifying velocity of an object meant to inflict harm, or perhaps, in a moment of madness, simply thrown in a fit of uncontrollable anger, with Thomas tragically in its path. The subtle distortion in his pupils, initially dismissed as a photographic anomaly, was now understood as the optical effect of a rapidly approaching object, coupled with the involuntary widening of eyes in sudden, stark terror. The light bouncing off the polished brass of the clock face reflecting into Thomas's eyes became a macabre signature of the impending tragedy. It was a horrifying, almost impossible coincidence. The exact fraction of a second the photographer chose to press the shutter was the precise moment Thomas's eyes captured the instrument of his demise. The seemingly benign backdrop of the family parlor, with its heavy drapes and polished furniture, transformed into a stage for a domestic horror. The photographer, oblivious, had captured not just a family but a microsecond before a life was extinguished, a silent scream frozen in time. The innocent portrait was now a haunting piece of forensic evidence, a visual record of a child's last, terrifying sight, a testament to a hidden crime that had been swallowed by the silence of history. The chilling precision of this detail, now undeniable, transformed the quaint family photograph into a profound, gut-wrenching document of trauma, an accidental memorial to a life unjustly stolen. The immediate aftermath of that horrific moment, as revealed through fragmented coroner's reports and hushed family letters, was a desperate scramble to conceal the truth. The official cause of death for Thomas Abernathy was hastily recorded as an accidental fall, a tragic tumble down the stairs. The family, steeped in Victorian propriety and acutely aware of the social stigma surrounding domestic violence or even accidental death within the home, had conspired to bury the truth deeper than Thomas's small grave. Fear, shame, and a desperate desire to protect the family's reputation had driven their collective silence. The father, the likely perpetrator, was never publicly implicated. His outburst of rage conveniently swept under the rug of respectable appearances. The mother, caught between grief and the crushing weight of societal judgment, became an accomplice to the lie, her silence a desperate act of self-preservation and an attempt to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the surviving children. The community, small and tightly knit, either genuinely believed the fabricated story or chose to look away, unwilling to shatter the illusion of peace in their midst. Whispers may have circulated, but they remained just that. Whispers, never solidifying into accusations. The injustice was profound. A child's life reduced to a convenient fiction, his memory tainted by a lie. The tragedy wasn't just Thomas's death, but the subsequent erasure of the truth, the denial of accountability, and the enduring pain inflicted upon his surviving siblings who were forced to carry the weight of that unspoken secret throughout their lives. The researcher felt the full, crushing force of this historical cover-up. The document spoke of official procedures, but her imagination painted a vivid picture of the terror, the grief, and the suffocating silence that followed. She saw the fear in the siblings' eyes, the heavy burden of complicity, the silent trauma that would ripple through generations. This wasn't merely a past event. It felt like an open wound, festering for over a century, demanding acknowledgement. The emotional intensity of piecing together this complete picture left her breathless, a profound sense of sorrow mingling with righteous indignation. The weight of this truth, a century-old secret now resting solely on her shoulders, was immense. The researcher grappled with the profound ethical implications of revealing such a deeply buried, painful reality. Her internal struggle was fierce. On one hand, she understood the desire for peace, for the past to remain undisturbed, allowing the dead to rest. On the other, the image of Thomas Abernathy's terrified eyes, reflecting the instrument of his death, was a powerful, silent plea for justice, for truth. How could she, having uncovered such a blatant injustice, simply rebury it? The sense of responsibility she felt towards the boy, and indeed towards the entire family whose lives had been warped by this tragedy and subsequent cover-up, was overwhelming. She understood that revealing this truth would undoubtedly disturb a long-held peace, perhaps even bring a degree of posthumous shame to descendants who knew nothing of this dark chapter. Yet for historical integrity, for the sake of Thomas, and for a belated form of justice, it felt necessary. Her perception of history had irrevocably shifted. No longer was it just a collection of dates, names, and academic facts. It was raw, human stories, often fraught with pain, injustice, and meticulously hidden secrets. She had become an accidental custodian of these forgotten narratives, a voice for those silenced by time and circumstance. The burden of being the sole bearer of this century-old secret was heavy, but it also brought a clarity of purpose. She had a moral obligation to share what she had found, to ensure that Thomas Abernathy was remembered not as a child who tragically fell, but as a victim of a hidden, horrific act. The decision of how best to honor his unspoken plea, to present this truth with both sensitivity and uncompromising accuracy, now consumed her every waking thought. She was fully prepared to share this truth, understanding its immense gravity and its power to rewrite a small, forgotten corner of history, finally giving Thomas the voice he deserved. The photograph, once a simple family portrait, would now stand as a stark, poignant testament to the fragility of life and the enduring power of truth. The weight of the truth, once an oppressive burden, now transformed into an unshakable resolve, propelled the researcher forward. Her immediate course of action was clear. This story, Thomas's story, could not remain buried. It deserved to emerge from the shadows, not as a sensationalized expose, but as a meticulously documented historical account, a testament to a life tragically cut short and a truth deliberately obscured. She began the painstaking process of compiling every scrap of evidence, every report, every obscure mention, weaving them into a coherent and compelling narrative. This wasn't merely about presenting facts, it was about reconstructing a forgotten moment, giving context to a silent plea captured in a child's eyes. She collaborated with a trusted historical society known for its integrity and commitment to preserving overlooked histories, understanding that the institutional backing would lend credibility to such an extraordinary claim. The process of assembling the complete narrative was arduous. Each piece of evidence, from the coroner's chillingly understated report to the subtle forensic analysis of the photograph itself, had to be presented with precision and clarity. She crafted a detailed report cross-referencing every date, every name, every detail, building an irrefutable case for what had transpired in that seemingly innocent 1910 portrait. The narrative she constructed was not just a dry academic paper. It was a deeply empathetic journey into the lives of the Abernathy family, exploring the societal pressures, the domestic tensions, and the desperate attempts to maintain appearances in an era where such tragedies were often swept under the rug of family privacy. When the report was finally complete, peer-reviewed by fellow historians who initially approached it with skepticism but left convinced by the sheer weight of evidence, it was prepared for a public unveiling. The revelation came through a special exhibition at the Historical Society, accompanied by an in-depth online publication. The centerpiece was, of course, the photograph of little Thomas. Initially, visitors and online readers approached the image with their preconceived notions of quaint nostalgia. Then they would read the accompanying text, detailing the forensic analysis, the unearthed reports, and the chilling truth about the mantel clock reflected in the boy's terrified eyes. The public reaction was profound. There was an initial wave of disbelief, quickly followed by a collective gasp of shock as the evidence unfolded. The innocent 1910 photograph was utterly recontextualized, transforming from a simple family portrait into a powerful, almost unbearable symbol of hidden histories, domestic violence, and the enduring power of a single image to hold a century-old secret. Local historians revisited their archives, finding new resonance in old records, acknowledging the historical wrong that had been done to Thomas and his family. His forgotten story, once a whisper in the past, now resonated with a clear, undeniable voice, allowing a forgotten victim to finally be remembered and a piece of local history to be profoundly understood. For the researcher, the public revelation brought a profound sense of closure, tinged with an enduring sadness. Her mission, to give voice to the silent witness, was accomplished. She had walked through the labyrinth of the past, guided by the ghost of a child's gaze, and emerged with a truth that demanded acknowledgement. The lasting emotional connection she felt to little Thomas Abernathy, whose eyes had held such a terrible secret for over a century, remained. He was no longer just a subject of research, but a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of truth. His image, once ordinary and easily overlooked, now served as a powerful, almost sacred testament to the hidden depths of history, to the silent stories that photographs can tell when one dares to look closer, to question what seems innocent, and to listen to the whispers of the past. Through her dedication, this one photograph had not only changed the understanding of a specific time and event, but had also underscored the immense responsibility that comes with interpreting history. This journey, sparked by a subtle anomaly in a child's eyes, was a stark reminder of the countless untold stories that lie hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. Every dusty archive, every faded photograph, every forgotten artifact holds a potential secret, a fragment of human experience waiting to be revealed. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question assumptions, and to appreciate the profound narratives embedded in everyday objects and images. History is not just a collection of grand events and famous figures. It is also the sum of these deeply personal, often tragic, and frequently overlooked human experiences. The story of little Thomas Abernathy, silently screaming through a century-old reflection, serves as a powerful testament to this truth. His eyes, now understood, implore us all to approach the past with both curiosity and empathy, to seek out the unseen, and to ensure that no voice, however faint, remains unheard forever. If you found this journey into history's hidden corners as compelling as we did, please like this video, share it with others who appreciate a good mystery, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. What other innocent-looking photos might hold a darker truth? And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the past and click the bell for notifications on our next video.